finished that of Samach day.
Yeah, good morning. We are on Hilchos Tainus, Tavkuf Samach Gimel. Din mi shehir belibo lihitanos. Okay, so Aleph. Mi shehir belibo, person in his mind was accepting to do a Tainus. Shelo bishat tfilat mincha. He had it in mind before, it was in the afternoon, the day before, but it was not during Shemana Esrei, like we learned before it does work. Here he did it before Tfilas Mencha. So according to Chazal, right, according to the halacha, right, through Shmuel, that's the earliest time you can do the Kabbalah. As if it's during the Shemana Esrei, in the afternoon before. So you did it here, he did it here, beforehand. So then, lo have Kabbalah. It's not a Kabbalah. It doesn't count as a Kabbalah. De lo adif mehotzi piv. And he's saying it's not any, obviously it can't be better than a person who said it verbally, mehotzi bepiv, out loud, lihitanot lemachar. If a person makes a Kabbalah before Tfilas Mincha, even if it's in the afternoon, does it verbally, but it's before Mincha, so we already learned de lo have Kabbalah Tainus, that it doesn't count as a proper Kabbalah for the din of Tainus. Kevan shelo kiblo b'tfilas ha-mincha. Anytime you do a Kabbalah, the Shulchan Aruch is very clear, anytime you do a Kabbalah before Tfilas Mincha, it does not count as a proper Kabbalah. It's not going to work for it's not going to work for Anenu. It's not going to work for to be Makayim a previous neder. Okay, so then it doesn't work. Now, what happens though if a person did this? Does he have to keep his Kabbalah? So it certainly doesn't work for the din of Kabbalah to be Mikayim, like we just said, the neder and Anenu. But maybe now you made a new Kabbalah and you have to keep your word. You made a Kabbalah that tomorrow you're fasting. It was true, it was done before Mincha. And it happens to be, right, we mentioned already that it's a whole machloket rishonim if it does work, b'diavad or not. But Lamaisa the Shulchan Aruch holds, even b'diavad, it doesn't count for neder and Anenu, but maybe it does count that you are obligated. So, many of the Achronim, the Mishnah Berurah is a great summary, but really many of the Achronim point out that if you say it verbally, you are chayav to keep it. As long as it's during the, he says anytime during the day, I'm not sure if it matters, the day could even be beforehand. Once you verbally say it, then, and he says perhaps even, he says he actually writes even behirhur. That happens to be a machlokas, which he also points out. L'maisi, he holds if again, let me say this again. If you think about it mentally or verbally, and you do it before mincha, he does say you're chayav midin neder, because you made a Kabbalah that you're going to fast. It technically doesn't work to be makayim a neder that you previously made or a for Anenu. All right, except again, according to the Minhag Ashkenaz, they follow the Ramah, and even if they're not chayiv, if they are fasting, they can still say Anenu and Shomei Tefillah by Mincha. But anyways, let's get back to where we are. So according to, so do you have to keep the Kabbalah anyway? So yes, you do have to. Then he points out, the Magen Avraham, and that may be the halacha as well for Ashkenazim. I'm not going to take sides between the Magen Avraham and the Mishnah Berurah, but it happens to be a machlokas, and it depends, maybe the Mishnah Berurah is just quoting everybody and not machriya. But the Magen Avraham says, if you verbally say beforehand, before mincha, you verbally say, I'm going to accept a tainus. Now, since you verbally said it, and it's you're chayav to be makayim your word, and you have to fast. According to the Magen Avraham, though, if you only mentally accept it in your head, not during the Shemona Esrei, beforehand, then you are not chayav at all to keep your non-verbal, your mental Kabbalah. Okay. So I think that's enough for that. But what I just want to point out, which is extremely related to this, it's a little bit related to what we learned, and it's going to come up again and again, is the Shulchan Aruch himself also writes that there are times when you do a Kabbalah, and you didn't fulfill the Tanaim of a Kabbalah, like we already said a few times, you are still chayav l'kayim nidro. You still have to be makayim your neder. So we see that lashon also in the Shulchan Aruch, and we've seen that a few times if you looked at the Mishnah Berurah inside.
Are you saying the Magen Avraham doesn't say that?
No, the Magen Avraham agrees that if you verbally make a Kabbalah, then you're chayav to keep your word.
And
if it's only mentally, then if it's before Tfilas Mincha, you're not chayav. That's the Shulchan Aruch and that's the Magen Avraham.
You don't have to keep it as an neder.
You don't have to keep it at all. You're allowed to eat. Again, there's opinions in the Rishonim on understanding the Gemara that it could be when you say Lo Have Kabbalah, you're allowed to eat. But we do see from the Shulchan Aruch, all the Nosei Kelim, the Ramah, it's clear that we hold you have to keep your word, and that if you make a Kabbalah and you didn't follow the rules, you still have to keep your word. Okay, so I think that's pretty clear at this point. What I just want to point out is what's a little fuzzy. The Mishnah Berurah doesn't get into specifics. At least I haven't seen it yet. And the Aruch Shulchan presents it very nicely. He points out that all these times when we're learning the Shulchan Aruch, and the Shulchan Aruch and a few simanim, he really says it beferish himself also, but we'll just jump the gun a little bit, that whenever you do a Kabbalah and you don't do a proper Harei Alai, I'm not going to eat, B'lashon Neder, right? Hilchos Nedarim, we're going to get to later. Whenever you say a Kona Malai, so then those are they're proper Lashonos when you have all the halachos of Nedarim. All these cases when we say, and the Pashtas, the Mishnah Berurah would agree, all these cases that we keep saying, you made a Kabbalah, you have to keep your word. You have to keep your neder. All those cases, if you don't use the lashon of Harei Alai or Kona Malai, you have to keep your word, but it's not midin nedarim, technical nedarim. It doesn't have the hilchos of nedarim, and there are certain nafkaminas. Again, Aruch Shulchan is great. He quotes it's the Ravid. I mean, I looked up also the Ravid, the Muki Yosef, Ramban, Ritva. They all say if you don't use that lashon of a neder, you don't have the halachos of neder. The Shulchan Aruch, Beis Yosef says that clearly la halacha, and according to the Beis Yosef, he said, and the Kesef Mishnah, same Rav, same person, says that's the kavana of the Rambam. The Aruch Shulchan learns the Rambam a little differently, but so okay. Now, so everyone agrees Lamaisa though. If you make a Kabbalah, you have to keep your word. The Aruch Shulchan writes midirabanan, you have to keep it. I guess from a technical halachic perspective, he's coming from. It could be the other Rishonim. Another way of understanding it could be even midaraisa, you have to keep Kabbalah. Not midin nedarim, that we established. It's not a proper neder for all technical halachos. It doesn't have the halacha of nedarim, but again, we have psukim about being honest. In the Torah, we just read in the Chumash, midvar sheker tirchak. That's a pasuk deraisa. So again, as far as technical halachic definitions and parameters, it might be on a derabanan. The technicalities may be a little bit more derabanan, but the concept we see is certainly deraisa. I'll just quickly just rattle a few Maimar Chazal that just nice. We know in the end of Avos, the world is Mekayim on three things. And one of them is Emes. Gemara in Shabbos Kuf Yotet. Lo charva Yerushalayim ela bishvil shepasku mimenu anshe emuna. People, lack of trustworthy people in the world. And otherwise, there wouldn't have been a Churban. Rav Chaim Vital writes, the koach given to Samach Mem to destroy both of the Beit HaMikdash is whenever there's a zman of sheker in the world, that's what gives him the koach. A nice Reishis Chochmah quotes from the Midrash, a person who does business, be'emes, you don't cheat people in business by lying. So then, ki'ilu kiyem kol Torah. Someone who's honest in business is as if he kept the entire Torah. Psachim Gimel, Akash Baruch Hu hates some people, and one of them is someone who's medaber, echad bepeh, he speaks one way, but in his heart, he's really thinking somewhere else. And the Mishlei, Sonei Hashem Lashon Sheker, from the Mishlei Vav. And I think we get the idea. Kisya Kavod is also built on Emes. It's from Yeshayahu Tetzayin. V'huchan b'chesed kisei v'yeshev alav be'emes. We all know the chosam of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Emes. Sotam and Beis Dalal Kitos are not Mekabel Pnei Shechina, and one of them is Shakranim. So that's just, there's not so many places. Maybe we'll wait till Hilchos Nadarim and Choshen Mishpat. But now, so what's a couple obvious nafkaminas if it's a neder or a kabbalah? So one is, we mentioned earlier, is bepeh, bedibur. If a person is, in order for it to be a proper neder, it has to be verbal. That's Hilchos Nadarim. But, right, kol matzeh mipicha. Then, but a kabbalah could be hirhur. Depends on the case. If it's during, as we mentioned before mincha, after mincha, it's a whole machokas. Okay.
So if he was maharer.
So if you're maharer, just as a recap, it's a machlokas if you have to keep the kabbalah. And we already.
You said because it's a neder. Or it's
No. It's really midarabanan, midar sheker, because of emes. Unless you verbally say, anytime, see that's why I wanted to point it out now and not wait till much later, but anytime you see in the Shulchan Aruch or the Nosei Kelim that say you have to keep your Kabbalah midin neder, or you did it verbally, but it wasn't done in the proper time, as we all learned, you did it at nighttime, like whatever it is, and they all say, oh, midin neder, you have to keep your word. It doesn't mean midin hilchos nadarim. It's just, all right, that's what all the Rishonim point out. Another time is if you need to do a taras nadarim, the Beis Din or a chacham echad, is if you need. It depends if you did it was a neder or just a kabbalah. If it was just a kabbalah, so you can. So the halacha is love upareya. You can borrow and pay back. In other words, you were going to pick one day and it's not working for you, so then you can eat that day and make it up a different day. But if it's a neder, you're not allowed to do that. If the neder is that day, you can't just switch without a taras nadarim. Or a person is sick. What if you're make a neder? It doesn't matter how sick you are. You have to keep your neder, unless it's pikuach nefesh. But if it's just a kabbalah and you're sick, we always assume that whenever you're sick, you are lova pareya, or just you didn't have it in mind for that situation. Whatever, you can make it up. Also, if a person makes a neder or a kabbalah that he's going to fast on Shabbos, for example. There's other days, right? Yom Tov, Rosh Chodesh, Purim, Chanukah, we're going to get into that. Let's say a person makes a neder, he's going to fast on Shabbos. Do you have to keep it?
No, because you can't fast on Shabbos.
So you have to keep it because you made a neder.
But not Shavuot is not challah.
So we're going to get to a neder versus a shvuah. Very good. So we'll see that inside. So this topic, it jumps around a little bit, but I have to say it at some point. But so if you make a neder, you have to keep your neder, even if it means a great riddle for your friends is, when do you say Anenu during Shemona Esrei on Shabbos? I think if you make a neder, a tainas chalam. I'm not sure where to put it in, but I heard quoted b'shem Shulchan Aruch Harav. You would actually say Anenu on Shabbos.
How can you, even if I tainas chalam, how can you? Maybe
you're l'kain netzor. How would you fast on Shabbos?
Yeah, you've got chiyuvim on Shabbos.
Yeah, I know, but you made a neder, so that's you can't violate your neder. The kum v'aseh.
All of that.
And they then you have to fast
Yeah.
again, is
Because you fasted.
because you fasted.
So we'll see when we get there soon.
Punished for your punishment.
So, but if it's just a Kabbalah,
No.
then you have to eat on Shabbos. So it doesn't make, so when the Mishnah Berurah says you have to keep your neder, I think the Mishnah Berurah would agree with everything that we've been saying. I haven't seen any otherwise. Okay, now we're on to Taf Kuf Samech Dalet. Din Layo Shalifnei Tainis. So we touched upon this yesterday. Aleph. Kol Tanit Shochlim Bo Balayla. Whenever you have a Tainis that you are, right, you accepted a Tainis for the next day, and it's a Tainis that you're allowed to eat at night, right, which is basically always except Tisha B'Av, Yom Kippur. Bein B'tzibur, bein B'yachid. Doesn't matter what kind of a Tainis it is. The fast is only during the day. So then, and you eat at night. So hareza ochel v'shoteh ad she'aleh amud hashachar. So you're allowed to eat and drink up until dawn. Let's just say 72 minutes before sunrise. Okay, it might be a little different, but v'hu shelo yashan. Also, what is sunrise? But we'll go with the. I think generally we say 72 minutes, or some say more, before astronomical sunrise. V'hu shelo yashan shnat keva. And that's if you don't have a full, proper sleep, a keva sleep. Permanent's not the right word. I don't know, a proper sleep. That's okay. So then, that's if you don't have a proper sleep. However, let's read on. Aval im yashan shnat keva. If you do have a proper sleep, so then Eine choser ve'ochel ve'lo shote. You're not, when you wake up, right? We had this. Let's say you wake up 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning before alos hashachar, and you're up for the day. Or even if you're not up for the day, but you got up, you already had your proper sleep. You slept a number of hours, and that was your proper sleep. Probably even 30 minutes is enough. Once you have a proper sleep for 30 minutes, I believe you're done. You can no longer eat and you can no longer drink, not even liquids. Ela imkein hitne lecho olishtot. Unless you make a specific tanai before you fall asleep, that when you wake up, you have in mind that you didn't accept your fast and you're still going to eat and drink if you want to before alos hashachar. So that's the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, and Shnas Keva, so did not look into this. I'll tell you just the Mishnah Berurah says the difference. Shnat Keva is when if a person, you're no longer like in and out, you're not dozing in and out. A person calls your name, you're not going to answer. So then, even if you're not lying down, he calls out a Shnas Keva, and you can no longer eat or drink. And it could be that you need to be lying down. I'll just leave that as a tzarachiyam. But the Mishnah Berurah is clear on his opinion. If you're sitting down at a chair and you fall asleep for half an hour, you're out cold. So on this aspect, yesh layan. The Mishnah Berurah says that's shnat keva, but I'm not sure. I think we say 30 minutes is the number. But again, he doesn't specify it. I know in general, we do say for shnas keva, let's say for bircha satara. So there it has to be lying down for 30 minutes. That's what we generally say. And if you're lying down for 30 minutes, many say, even if it's during the day, many say, we discussed this earlier, you would repeat birkas hatara. So I would assume it might be the same. I'm not sure. Here the Mishnah Berurah for some reason says even if you're sitting up, but I'm not sure. Or maybe he means lying down on a sofa versus your natural bed. That could be what he means. I would assume you need to be lying down. That's normally what Shnas Keva means. I did not look into. Okay, so that's what I would think.
The Torah is talking about the time. And here he says,
so then he discusses what about a person falls asleep in the middle of a meal. So here he says, it sounds like even if you're sitting up at the middle of a meal, he says it's a machlokas if that's called shnas keva or not. because he wants to say, according to the Beis Yosef, you would be finished, you can no longer eat and drink, but he says, many say, you are allowed to, because the fact that you're still, it doesn't talk about lying down and sitting up. He says, because you're still in the middle of eating, you never had Hesach Hadas that you're done. So therefore, it's as if you always had it tonight that you still want to eat. You didn't go to sleep. You fell asleep in the middle of your meal. You still want to eat. And he says, Hamachmer mikar din, you could be mekel, and Hamachmer kadosh yi'amar lo. Okay, so you'll be a kadosh if you're machmer. And what happens if? Let's see. Here, let's finish reading the Ramah. Now, if he says if you fall asleep before you eat dinner, then I think he writes that. I think everyone agrees that for sure you're allowed to keep eating, because Ashanas Keva, before your dinner, you just fell asleep. You knew you for sure did not have in mind that you're asleep for the night. You didn't even have dinner yet. So there, I think he says everyone agrees that you're allowed to eat. Well, that's what I remember. I think okay, that was in the Sha'ar Tzion. That's why. Okay, so that's, I'm assuming everyone agrees. For sure, if you didn't even have dinner yet, and it's before the meal, then everyone would agree you can keep on eating. Now the Haggah, V'yesh Omrim, the Bishtia Ein Sarich Tanai. The Rama argues, and he says, for liquids, you're allowed to have water. Depending on the person, the Mistama Daito Shel Adam Lishtia Charashena V'hava Kilo Hitna. Because in Mistama, everyone wants to drink some water when they wake up, have something to drink, and since he always does that, so therefore, it's as if you made it tonight. So the Shulchan Aruch writes, basically, you can't even have liquids. The Ramah basically says, you're allowed to have liquids, because in Mistama, that's the das of a person. And the Mishnah Berurah kind of says, Lechatchila, one should be a machmer, like the Shulchan Aruch, unless this person really always just gets up and has a drink. I mean, some people do that with coffee or tea every morning or water. So then he says you don't have to make it tonight. So depending on the situation, but the Mishnah Berurah more or less sides with the Ramah. Anyways, best to make it tonight before you go to sleep. Yeah. Okay, maybe we'll just start a little bit. We'll do one. Tavkuf Samech Hey, Din Tfilas Anenu. We'll read the first one. Aleph. Yachid Omer Anenu b'Shomei Tefillah. An individual is allowed to say Anenu in Shomei Tefillah. What am I saying? A person, any individual who says Anenu during, he says it in Shomei Tefillah, that's the proper time. Bein Yachid Shekibur Lav Tainis, Bein Yachid Tamid Palim Tzibor B'Tainet Tzibor. Anytime an individual davens, he always says Anenu in Shomei Tefillah. Simple. And we know the Shliach Tzibor, when he says Chazar Rashatz, he has his own bracha. Right? Then he says his own bracha between Goel and Rafa'enu. However, v'chen shaliach tzibur shemesader tfilato belachash, when the shaliach tzibur is saying his own private Shemona Esrei and preparing beforehand, so then kiyachidami, he's exactly like an individual. He's doing his own lachash, and therefore with shomei tefillah, he says it in shomei tefillah. Right? The shaliach tzibur doesn't practice saying it as a separate bracha. The Omro Kodem Kiyat HaShomea, and the proper place is to say it right before. We're all familiar, it's in the Siddur, right before you say Kiyat HaShomea Tefillah. And then he points out, when you say it in Shomea Tefillah, V'lo yachtam be'one be'eit tzara, you don't make a whole separate bracha, Ela k'shemagia l'chol eit tzara v'tzuka, but you finish the Tefillah, and you finish with the words eit tzara v'tzuka, and you don't say Baruch Ata Hashem v'chulei, you jump back to Kiyat HaShomea Tefillah, right? We're all familiar with this in the Siddur. V'lo yeshanem yimadbeya bracha, we don't change the bracha, the midbeya, the coin of the bracha. It is what it is. Afilu k'shemit anei yachid, yomar anenu b'tzom ta'anitenu. Now this is interesting. The Ramah says, whenever you say anenu, we say the lashon of biyom ta'anitenu. And that's the minhag by most Ashkenazim, I believe. I've seen that in a couple of Sidurim. It says, Biyom ta'anitenu. That's what the Mishnah Berurah says is the minhag for Ashkenazim, like the Ramah. But he points out there are some Poskei Ashkenaz, he quotes them, who says, Biyom ta'anit, Biyom tzoma ta'anit, and that is the minhag of the Sfardim, to say Biyom ta'anit, And you don't want to say, some say biyom ta'aniti, if it's just individual, but he says it's better not to say, not to exclude yourself from the klal. And if you say yom ta'anit, that's a little bit ambiguous and it could be for everybody. Yom ta'anitenu is for sure for everybody. And everyone says for sure it's not, because you want to be mishtatif everyone together. That's the idea of being plural. And it's not, and it's certainly not keshikra, because even if you say ta'anitenu, it's not b'shikra, because we assume, the Magen Avraham writes, we assume that there's somebody in the world who's also fasting. But it's a drop dochak. Tov.